It's Thursday in Qatar, Friday in Australia, and it's almost time for the Socceroos' clash with Tunisia. David Weiner with you once again for the Keep Up in Qatar podcast, joined by David Davutovic and Tom Smithies. Gents, before we begin, David, Tom, it would be rude of me not to begin. We always talk about what we've done in our days. It would be rude of me not to mention what we did today, gents. 7 o'clock this morning, we got up. Our listeners we've been talking about all the conditions here. We tested the conditions. We got a media match on the Aspire training pitch against the media staff, so the staff of the Socceroos. Dave, will you narrate us through what happened in the first few minutes of the game?
Well, quite extraordinary scenes from the Aspire Academy this morning as the media contingent took a shock 1-0 lead, and perhaps the greatest shock was the goal scorer, one Thomas Sheridan Smithies, who somehow managed to glance the ball into the it was the back stick, back post, upright, with an amazingly timed run, which apparently even got the praise of Socceroos' great Tony Vidmar, who was on the opposition team. He was meant to be marking Tom. I'm not sure what Vidmar was doing, but no, look, full credit to you, Tom. It was I've never seen you do it before. I don't think I'll ever see you do it again, but it was a top finish.
The pain on your face, having to say all of that, has made my World Cup. That's all I can say.
And Tom, what happened in the second half?
Oh, I blazed over a really good chance as well. So, I'll take that.
It was a great experience. We've all been doing a million things here. It was nice to get all the travelling Australian pack working here professionally together on the same park. Magnificent training facilities the Australians have been at. The pitch was immaculate. No excuses for anyone's touch. Really stinking hot at 7:30 in the morning, which was good for us to experience, to live that we've talked about so much about the conditions here, and just good fun to be in the same vicinity as the Socceroos staff. So, a really great hit out.
Yeah, every World Cup I've been to, there's always been one of these games. In 2002, I was lucky enough to play with the Croatian contingent, and since then it's been with the Socceroos media and officials. And we do, believe it or not, work pretty hard whilst we are on tour. So these little blowouts are fantastic.
To the detail. Now, this is Friday as you listen to this in Australia, and the countdown is well and truly on to this. Let's call it a grand final. Cup final game against Tunisia, 9 p.m. in Australia, 1 p.m. here actually, a really early start talking about the conditions, which will be in blazing sunshine on Saturday. Graham Arnold was watching that media staff game today. I can tell he will not be calling anyone up from that game at all.
He was there for about 4 minutes and for some reason he left out of disgust, I think.
He did say to us afterwards, none of you lot can ever analyse a game ever again after the
Did
way
he say that?
Yeah.
It's not ideal. And next to him was the conditioning guru, Andrew Clark, as well.
Who could say we can never comment on anyone's fitness at any point at any time. Down to business. We've learned a little bit more. We've heard from some more players since the last podcast, Milos Degenek, Marco Tilio as well. Gents, we've also spoken to a few Tunisian types as well to try and get some more intel for our listeners on the team that we're going to face. First and foremost, development since the last game, Dave. Hearing from the side and people more about moving the lessons on from France and moving toward this Tunisia game. It's going to be physical. It's going to be likely be fast. We're going to have to probably come out and set some tempo as well. What's the latest news from here re Saturday's game?
Yeah, most of the discussion has been about recovering, moving on mentally. Hearing from the players and Coach Graham Arnold, it's very much about picking themselves up and regrouping and focusing on the Tunisia game. Arnie even referenced the first game as a friendly, so you can see the way he's conditioning the players or the way he's approaching it mentally. They haven't spoken much about the tactical side of the France game. They have alluded to it a little bit more so the players, not so much Graham Arnold. I think they know what went wrong. They know they need to, play a little bit higher, be a little bit more aggressive if and when they do take the lead. In Graham Arnold's words, they need to protect it better. So a lot of it has been really about the mindset going into this game.
It's interesting talking to Graham Arnold. He is. The players have referenced him being a father figure, and you sort of see every time one of them does something wrong or makes a mistake in a game, it's almost like he lives it. It's like you do as a parent with your own kids. And when you look at the number of players in the squad that he has brought in, it is so much his squad. I mean, it's a new look squad for the next cycle as much as for this World Cup. But there's 14 players, I make it, who he gave a debut to. There's Hristic had one cap. He gave Matty Ryan and Mitch Duke their debuts at the Mariners. This is very much a team in his image. Yeah. And I think he was really hurt on their behalf by the defeat to France. But as he said, it has to be a learning experience. Otherwise, it's to no end.
Milos Degenek this morning, who got his World Cup debut in that game off the bench. He's not one of the more high-profile members of the squad, but I was blown away by his media conference this morning. One of the most impressive since we've been here, talking with such mentality and such drive and talking about the role that players like him. He's not experienced or a senior statesman in the Socceroos in terms of being like an Aaron Moy or a Matt Ryan, Jackson Irvine, but he's played at the highest level. He's played in Champions League. He's played in front of incredible crowds for his club. He's played against incredible players. He spoke about how he's got Keanu Backus and Cam Devlin at his table, and he's constantly talking to them and mentoring them about the mentality and the stakes in these games and how to cope with it. And part of that, David, is exactly what you just said. The older players taking on that role of saying, let's dust ourselves off from France and look forward to this game. And the only things we take from France is what we can actually learn from.
And life experience also, having
yes.
Grown up in the Balkans, and I think you listened to him speak, but it was one of the things that he's passed on to the players. This isn't pressure.
Yeah, brilliant. It's on the Keep Up social channels and the Keep Up app. What he was talking about is, well, let's also look at perspective. You think this is pressure? I'll tell you, pressure was when I was fleeing a war or living in a war, or the adversity of when I was in Australia and I went overseas as a professional footballer at 16 in freezing conditions in Germany, wearing 4 jumpers because I couldn't afford a jacket. You do that, you can take on this game against Tunisia. A brilliant perspective. A few of us left that press conference going, right, why didn't he give us that speech before the media game? We would have run through a few more brick walls.
We haven't heard Milos Degenek speak much throughout his Socceroos tenure. He's kind of been a regular in the squad, but has never really been a regular first 11 player. But when you listen to him today, it makes it a little bit clearer as to why he's in the squad. Sometimes you pick these players who you know may not start or may not play a hugely important role on the field, but off the field, they're absolutely critical. The chats they have behind the scenes, in the meals room, particularly with some of those younger, inexperienced players. And that's particularly crucial with this current Socceroos crop. So 6 of the starters against France made their first start in a World Cup, and 11 in total, inclusive of the 5 subs. So, your Degeneks and some of these older players are absolutely crucial. Get their arm around them.
So that's a really interesting point about the number of debutants. We spoke about going into the game, the Atkinson, the Rolls decision. After the game, was that inexperience, something that was maybe, a bridge too far for them, with the caveat of being that those 2 are going to be in the side for years and years and years to come and mainstays. But tactically, there's some decisions to make ahead of the Tunisia game, and let's reference that now with regards to the experience, because this is, as I said, as big a game as Australia's played in many, besides the Peru game, of course, in a long time. The stakes are absolutely massive. This game, you need to win. It's really banking on that because of how good Denmark are. Can we see? Let's start with those positions. Atkinson and Rolls, are they both in or out in this game? And who are the contenders to come in?
This is a really interesting question from Graham Arnold's point of view. Is does he protect Atkinson and take him out of the firing line, or does he say, get back on the bike, go straight back into it, and I have faith in you to, particularly in a very physical contest where his strength and his pace will be useful.
Yes.
Or does he take what's almost the easy option, which is to say you need a spell?
Yeah. Which he did between UAE and Peru, right? If my memory serves me correctly, Atkinson had a tough night against UAE and he kept him in the side for the Peru game.
Yeah. We've spoken about the selections and particularly the right back selection in the first game. You feel like he almost got it the wrong way around. That was the game for the more defensive-minded right back. This one against Tunisia, bring in Atkinson, who's going to, bomb on a little bit more and provide an attacking threat. Arnie gave a really interesting anecdote today about his conversation with Atkinson after the game on the earlier theme, didn't he, Tom? Talking about sitting him down and also saying, okay, you had a tough night, you made 2 mistakes. However, it's something that you'll look back on in 20 years when your career's done over a beer, and you'll tell your kids and all your mates that I played on Mbappe, and I might have made a couple of mistakes, but did 8 or 9 things fantastically well.
He absolutely, and this is interesting. This debate we continue to have about the selection of Atkinson for the first game. I'm still not convinced that it was the wrong call. I think that he didn't execute what he was asked to do, and I think the example came on the other side of the pitch, as is Bajic, who, as we said at the time, I thought had one of the best games he's ever had for Australia. And the reason I say that is, and why we bring this up again, is he played very high up the pitch when Australia were in possession, almost like a winger, was aiming to drive inside to create space on the outside for the actual left winger in Craig Goodwin, but also was able to get back, had the judgment to know when to get back. And there were a few desperate clearances and all that kind of thing. That was what Atkinson was, I think, was in the side to do, because the higher up the pitch he is, it forces back, in theory, France's wingers.
I've done a little Socceroos depth chart here.
Please, depth. Please,
depth
not
chart.
Hopefully not a death chart. It is a group of death, isn't it? We're always in the group of death, but you love a depth chart.
I do love a depth chart.
Dave, I'm struggling to spit this one out. Right back is where we've got the most depth. You've got Atkinson, Karacic, Deng, and Degenek. So there are many, many options for that position. So it'll be interesting to see who he chooses.
So on a TikTok live today, one of the fans asked, why would you put Deng in ahead of Atkinson? What is the case for changing it up? I'll relay that to this conversation. And does a selection of Rolls or Bailey Wright impact the other one at all?
So to take those points in order, Thomas Deng brings you pace and he brings you the ability to bring the ball out. I don't think the former is as important because Tunisia's forward line is not. They have 6 forwards in the squad, 5 of them are 30 and over and one's 29. They're not super quick. So that's a moot point. But the ability to bring the ball out and bring it through, play through the lines is going to be is something that they could think of. However, the whole game plan for the Socceroos is for one of the 6s to drop. So whether that's vital or not. I think Bailey Wright is a more interesting discussion because of the sheer power of the Tunisian front line. They are a tough bunch and they like to hold the ball up with the back to the defenders, backing into the defenders. Someone like Bailey Wright's not going to give them much space.
Yeah, you look at Bailey's nose, he's got the classic, English, Championship League One central defender's nose. It's copped a few elbows over the journey. Also that leadership with Bailey, we have referenced it numerous times. It's because he's genuinely one of those real leaders in that team, along with Jackson Irvine and Matty Ryan, the guy who behind the scenes pulls them together and also on the field. If Bailey Wright's on the pitch the other night against France, maybe they keep their composure a little bit more.
And don't drop as much. He'd be very comfortable screaming at those midfielders to push up a bit more. I can't imagine Kai Rolls, maybe Sutar a bit, but they're not as established.
Yeah.
I think we can see that change happening. Then further forward, and again, another one of the questions relayed that we spoke about on our live social channels today, but it's worth bringing to this discussion as well, is the style of the game, which will dictate the midfield. Do we expect to see the Australians try to dictate the tempo of the game? Tunisia there's no doubt we have to be up physically. They're a powerful side. That game against Denmark had a great click about it. It was really easy to watch despite being a 0-0 draw. But who is setting the agenda in this game? It's a grand final for Tunisia too, and they have a point on the board as well. Do we expect we'll set the running? Do we expect that Tunisia will try maybe absorb us a little bit and use the power that they've got up front? And if so, does a Hrustic almost make himself a compelling selection to make sure that if we are setting the agenda, we're able to remain composed when maybe we didn't at times on Wednesday night or Tuesday night, sorry.
Talking to Tunisian journalists and talking to a couple of the Tunisian players yesterday, they were all very cautious about saying, we're going to go for it, we're going to go out. And they kept saying, talking to Mohamed Dragot, the Tunisian winger, yesterday, he was saying that he'd seen some of the Socceroos game, he thought the result was unfair, that it wasn't that big a gap, but also talking about what a good team Australia are, and it's going to be very difficult for us. They're a good team. Yes, we'll have all these fans. Then talking to a Tunisian journalist from the state broadcaster who, again, was saying it's very hard to predict the result. We have more confidence than we did because of that draw with Denmark, but we're not going to say we're going to beat them. However, when they've got 40,000 screaming Tunisians, and they were so fervent, they were so emotional and so immersed in the occasion, it's going to be very hard for that team not to go at Australia.
That's just an interesting one because you've spoken to there were some Tunisian journalists now at Australian training today, and brilliant insight into why there is such an atmosphere here.
Yeah, a great interview. He gave up the Tunisian game plan and asked me not to pass it on to Graham Arnold. So it was delightful to.
Arnie doesn't read the newspapers, remember, so he won't be going to keep up.
Very good. So Qatar is supposedly the second biggest or favoured destination for Tunisians to move and work.
Yeah.
So France being the most popular destination. So there are some 40,000 Tunisians who call Qatar home. There's another 15 or 20,000 who've travelled over from Tunisia to watch the national team play. And it's no surprise. I mean, they were probably the first sets of fans that we saw when we were here, and it's just got bigger and bigger and louder as the days.
And around the corner from us, there's literally a coffee shop that is Tunisian flags everywhere. And we watched when you were at the game, Tom. We watched that game before heading over to the Australia game at that another local coffee shop next door, packed.
Yeah.
Fantastic atmosphere, fantastic noise and passion as well. So that's really interesting to know why that is the case.
Yeah, as Tom said, fantastic supporters, very loud. I mean, I was at the Morocco-Croatia game the other day, very, very similar with the Moroccan fans. They just don't stop. They cheer for their team. When the opposition has it, they whistle. So the Socceroos are going to have to be really careful. It's an occasion that they could very easily get overawed, especially some of the younger players. Yeah. I think back to Iran 97 in Tehran in front of 100,000 people. Montevideo in 2001.
Even Chile.
The first game of the 2014 World Cup. So we can go back into decades with Socceroos World Cup qualification games, but they're really going to have to keep their calm, and that's where a Bailey Wright and some of these experienced heads I think could really play an important part for the Socceroos. But the guy who'll set the tone for Tunisia is Issa Leidouni, the midfielder from Ferencvaros. He's an absolute beast in midfield. He got stuck in from the get-go, put an early tackle on Christian Eriksen.
Pumped his arms, was hyping up the crowd. It's brilliant to see. I love it.
Great to see. So, look, he's about $1.10 to come out and put a tackle on someone, Aaron Moy, or
get Jackson
Irvine
in on
the
him.
first 5 minutes. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Socceroos react. Can they match it with them physically? And then you've got, if a Hrustic comes into the 11, which I expect he will, that's where, the smarts and playing it into his feet and using his technical ability and his X factor to draw those fouls and, maybe get a couple of early bookings for the Tunisian and get them a little bit frustrated, get them under their skin. I think that could be really important.
And take the crowd out of the game.
Yeah.
So if the Australians can take the sting out of the game at certain points, and you look at it and go, well, that trio is a trio that plays or has played in front of massive crowds, both in Germany for Jackson Irvine. Aaron Moyes obviously played the Premier League. Hrustic played in Germany, now playing in Italy. Experience is no problem there. The craft and the poise to take this thing out of the game possession-wise, to control it, we may have become a bit... People talk about us being maybe a bit pedestrian at periods in the France game, but there was also the issue of control, and that forced us backwards. So that ability to take control there and become... But then also, if there is the prospect of Tunisia being a little bit more circumspect in this game as well, as you suggest, Tom, the skill to unlock them. So that trio looks to me to be, a lay down to be the midfield three.
The interesting thing will be that from his time in Germany, Hrustic will know Elise Sakiri, the number 6 for Tunisia, who is kind of everything goes through him. He's wearing a face mask. He's very distinctive, having broken his cheekbone recently. He roams all over. He has basically a defensive brief, but he's also very comfortable bringing the ball forward, bringing the ball through the lines when there's a gap, and everything goes through him. Now, Hrustic is going to have to do a job on him as well as being a productive offensive player. He's got to stop that source, because that's one of the key ways you stop Tunisia is to stop that source.
And Tunisia traditionally, they don't score a lot, but they don't concede a lot.
Yep.
I don't think they've conceded more than a goal in the bulk of their last however many games for a couple of years. And speaking to, again, some of the Tunisian journalists, they talk about how they are heavily influenced by the Serie A, by Italian football, very cautious, tactically savvy, defensive-minded. So the first goal on Saturday will be absolutely crucial.
But that that is, again, why I think Hrustic is so important and why they probably gave him till the 11th hour to get fit for this tournament, because they need his skill here. Tom, could Irvine not play that role as well, given that Irvine tends to be so combative and busy across midfield? And, Hrustic, correct me if I'm wrong, is a player that can keep himself free in terms of not doing as much work. Could it be a possibility, you think, that Irvine could go head-to-head with that number 6?
It can't be done in isolation. If Moy is sitting as deep as he did against France, then Irvine and Hristic have both got to press, because you've got numbers. The opportunity to have numbers in midfield, they play quite narrow. Yeah. Their wingers are quite narrow, and so there's got to be bodies there. It cannot be one or the other.
They're completely different players as well. Hrustic is a lot more comfortable getting the ball at his feet in tight spaces closer to goal. Jacko, his strengths are probably more bombing on, late runs into the box, aerial threat. So very different players. You can kind of get the best of both worlds with Jackson Irvine as well, because he's really fit and he can do a lot of that defensive work too.
No one made more sprints than him against France. Yeah. So we know he's going to be busy. We know he's going to put himself out there.
I don't think Hrustic will have more than 60 or 65 minutes in him. He was, a late confirmation. I mean, he made the squad, but he trained solo up until I think a couple of days out from the France game. So I'd be staggered if he played any more than that. But if he comes on, plays his role for an hour, does a job, at the very least it's a draw. Hopefully the Socceroos are up, then you can make a change. You can bring on a Riley McGree, a Marco Tilio. There's any number of options there.
So there's 3 talking points there. Hrustic in, right back, central midfield. Then we have one more discussion. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, for whatever plans that they had come into the tournament, I think Craig Wood makes himself probably undroppable.
Craig Goodwin?
Yeah, for this game? Or do you think tactically there's still an option?
Yeah, I've got no doubt leading into the France game, the coaches look at all 3 games. Okay, what are what's the squad composition? Who do we, pick for the first game? Who we potentially bring in for the second? I reckon they would have been earmarking Awe Mobile for a start in this second game. However, Craig Goodwin's performance and his first-class, world-class finish against France makes him very difficult to drop. In saying that, I think you've really just got to look at it from a tactical viewpoint. What are the Tunisians going to be like? How will they line up? And, who is a better matchup for them, Mobile or Craig Goodwin? They played with a back 3, almost a back 5, Tunisia, in that first game. The word is that they may revert back to the back 4, which they've played more regularly. So I think that's almost a 50-50 call, to be honest.
There's 4 changes, and with the pace and power of Mobile as well, it does match up quite well with the task there. Lecky, you suspect, is a lock.
Lecky's played every minute of every World Cup game the last 7.
Up front, I think we all came in, but we're probably saying for months, Mitchell Duke was the man for the France game. Is Jamie McLaren the man for the Tunisia game?
Or Jason Cummings, if you want a little more presence in the area. Again, the ability to hold the ball up. If we want to try and create pressure around the box, Jamie can't do that. Jamie's a brilliant finisher, but he can't be that player. So it's a game plan. Are you looking to hit the wingers early and get crosses in? In which case, I'd argue for Craig Goodwin over Mobile. I think he's a better crosser of the ball. But then you need someone who can head the ball. Or you're going to try and use Hrustic to thread the ball through. But one way or another, they need to create. We talk about taking the crowd out of the game. They need to create pressure, which is one of the ways of doing that. And that involves being able to, one of the striker being able to hold the ball up, bring the team forward.
Bit to unpack there.
Yeah, look, going back to the wingers, the other important point is they worked their bollocks off against France. They would have been knackered, Lecky and Goodwin. So that's the other consideration. That's where Andrew Clark, the strength and conditioning coach, plays a really, really key role. It is a 1 o'clock kickoff. Yes, they are air-conditioned stadiums, but, the heat will play more of a factor. But going back to the strikers discussion, for me, it's Duke or McLaren. And then it really comes down to what the Socceroos are thinking. Are they really desperate to come out hard, try and score early, shut up shop thereafter? Or are they going to play the long game? Perhaps get Duke to go in there. Look, Duke, he's an attacking threat also. I mean, I get very excited when I talk about it, but almost unleashed that absolute scorcher against France to put him 2-0 up. But he missed. He was narrowly wide.
Me and Duke both put the ball over the bar.
So, you know, he was also knackered at the end of it. He was working really, really hard in that game, and he admitted that he needed a bit of help. So, but yeah, McLaren, as you said, he's more. You need more of the ball. You need to back yourself in to be creating those chances with the Hrustic starting and the wide players. I think he could go with McLaren.
Interesting. Watch this space. I think they'll both play at some point, but it depends. I think it's a combination of whether it's which winger goes with which striker and what we're trying to get out of it.
The other point that John Aloisi makes in his column, which you can find on Keep Up, his exclusive column, is the importance of having players on the pitch that play together at club level. So you've got Matthew Leckie, Jamie McLaren, Marco Tilio, all from Melbourne City. Now, Tilio also spoke to the media today. He was obviously the late call-up for Martin Boyle. If you do start Leckie, then you maybe have... I mean, Tilio's not going to start on the bench. I think he maybe comes on later, depending on how the game goes. But yeah, do you bring on him and McLaren at the same time, 55th, 60th minute? Then you've got those three City players in there who've got that understanding.
Or coming Squall again together. They've got a great combination too, so we can bring those combination factors into it. All right, so
We've just mentioned about 19 players, but you could only play 16.
Well, we almost tried to play 12 at one point.
We had 13 on the pitch this morning.
Yeah, that's true. And it didn't work either. Right, we're looking at as many five changes, 5 or less. Really interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of days. We'll keep you updated. Keep Up App will have all the selection talk. If there's any news that develops, be sure to read it on the Keep Up app and see it on our Keep Up socials as well. Gents, final thoughts on this game, just to wrap it up before we sort of build on. The crowd factor, we've spoken about it. The side playing in these conditions, what's the biggest thing the side will have to do to cope with the atmosphere that the Tunisian fans will bring? How big a factor do we think? We've spoken about it sort of throughout. We've spoken about it in the previous podcast. Is it one of those great talking points, or do you think it's something that is going to be a factor?
The 3 Ps: poise, patience, possession. They have to keep the ball. They gave the ball away time and again. Graham Arnold referenced that. And that, he said the plan was never for them to drop. He wanted them to push back up. But when you give up possession, you back off because you're worried of what France are going to do with it. They have to keep the ball because that will just frustrate Tunisia. The Tunisian players will get annoyed. The crowd will quieten down. And to do that, you need to have poise in the heat of the battle, and you've got to have patience to understand the game is not won or lost in the first 5, 10, 15 minutes. It'll be won at some point over 90 minutes, and even at the end, they need to keep that poise and patience.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if Tunisia get their tails up and, you know, they get early shots on goal, heaven forbid they score an early goal, and you bring the crowd into it, I mean, it's fraught with danger for the Socceroos. It'd be so hard to come back from that. So the first 5 to 10, 15 minutes will be crucial. Keep their heads. They started very well against France, so I'm fairly confident that the Socceroos will again start well. But I'll go back to those experienced heads. I think getting that balance right in this first 11, you know, almost young player, older player, younger player, older player, you know, across the back and in the various positions will be crucial. 12
years since Australia won a World Cup game. There is no better opportunity than Saturday night to make history once again.
It's true.
I'll repeat the stat we did from the last podcast because I think it's really telling that in the last 30 games, Tunisia have won 18, but they've never won a game where they've conceded first.
Yep.
That early goal, that first goal, is so important.
Gents, I think that's all. Well, actually, one more thing, Tom. You just mentioned, you rattled off before, 5, 10, 15 minutes is really important. One of the interesting things at this tournament has been the amount of stoppage time. Have you guys noticed that? How much stoppage time there is?
Couldn't not notice it.
There's been a few injuries and a few VAR stoppages, but it's gone for sometimes. I think I've seen 9 minutes, and even I've seen a 6-minute half time or something like that. What do you guys make of that? It's what, value for money for the fan, extracting every second left of the referee's watch.
I was the poor sap who sat through the referee's press conference before the tournament started, and amongst the usual, we're going to tackle foul play and all that kind of stuff, was this very determined thing of ball in play more. They got targets, 68 minutes or...
Just make the games longer for that to happen.
Well, see, my view is if you're going to do that, you should really have a centralised timekeeper who literally stops the clock because... The frustrating thing for me is they're playing 10, 12, 13 minutes of injury time, but teams play differently in injury time. If it's at 81 minutes or whatever, you play differently. So when the ticks around, it's like suddenly everyone's hanging on desperately. So if you're really gonna play that much injury time, I would say just have a centralized timekeeper like they do in American sports, who just stops the clock, public clock, and you can see it. So the game actually does finish bang on 90 minutes.
It's a big change, though. That's a really big change. But I don't mind it because, you don't want teams taking advantage of time wasting, things like that. But with VAR...
Except it's not time. So the big thing FIFA said was it's not time wasting that wastes the majority of time. It's actually just the ball being out of play during the regular game. And the refs don't normally add on.
They're just guessing. They don't normally just...
They just kind of go, well, it's if there's a player down injured or a player's time wasting or there's something or a VAR check or a substitution, that's what they add the time on for. Hence you get you 2, 3, 4 minutes. But this thing is, whenever the ball's out of play, stop.
Yeah, but what about with VAR? The risk there is, and I know you shouldn't be losing time with VAR, but if VAR does take time, we could end up with a 10, 12-minute stoppage time.
Well, there have been. There have been games that have gone over 100 minutes.
England, because of that awful injury.
Well, that was an awful injury. That was literally a 10-minute stop.
Compounded by the addition of all the other time for VAR checks and for all the other stuff.
I don't mind it.
Don't be in a rush.
It does change the dynamics in terms of players' fitness, and usually you see if they want a player to make an impact, he generally comes on around that sort of 60, 65-minute mark. Will coaches bring players on later, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's interesting.
A lot of different factors that coaches will be weighing up. I haven't really heard too much about it yet from coaches. Graham Arnold certainly hasn't addressed it yet. But
I think he was glad to hear the final whistle, to be honest.
I think he was.
Very good. Don't undersell that session you're on. Wasn't it with Pierluigi Collina? Was he very scary through the Zoom?
Not through the Zoom, no. Partly because he kept pointing to video clips up on the big screen, and of course we were watching on Zoom, and the camera just stayed on him.
That would have been frightening in its own right.
Was that your highlight of the tournament, Tom?
No, David, it wasn't. It was seeing you miss-hit a number of crosses today. That was the highlight of my tournament.
You do love the referees, though, don't you?
You do hate the referees, let's be honest.
That's a very strong word.
All right, well, before this gets out of order, gents, let's pause it there. Tom, we got some action tonight. There's a stack of games on the World Cup today. Serbia, Brazil will be attending. And we'll wrap that up shortly. And Dave, you got plenty to kick on with as well. We're going to see some great columns and previews ahead of the Australia-Tunisia game, so we'll catch up with you shortly.
Yep, looking forward to it. And plenty of stories on the Tunisian team as well. So, plenty for our readers to mull over ahead of the big game tomorrow night.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your company. Another edition in the bag of Keep Up in Qatar. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and thank you for your feedback and for listening. Until the next episode, enjoy your football and enjoy everything about the World Cup.